Mikael Williams, the DN edge rusher out of Georgia. Joe, he had 33 pressures last season, 28 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, and the best overall rate of getting a pressure at 8.8 pressures per snaps. So I've been on him for a while now. I know that when me and you did the Twitter Spaces, I said that Mikael Williams is going to be the next Nolan Smith. Like, he's that kind of dude. He's got that kind of explosiveness. He's just a really damn good pass rusher. With my number 1 overall pick, I'm going to take Mikael Williams as my breakout superstar defensively, and especially on a really loaded Georgia team that will be here next year.
So that was my only defensive pick that I had written down was Mikael Williams from Georgia. Dude, I was doing my research. I ended up with a bunch of quarterbacks, but I was like, okay, let's pivot. Let's look for an edge rusher that makes sense. It was easy to look for a Georgia defensive lineman, but looking back at the 2022 recruiting class, one guy stood out to me at the very top of that list. And I'm referring to Mikael Williams, who was one of the highly recruited edge rushers, and I believe was one of the most highest ranked edge rusher consistently across a lot of websites. You mentioned the pressures. For him to have 4.5 sacks and that many pressures, we also, to add context for anyone who maybe was living under a rock and not watching Georgia football, Mikael Williams didn't really play that many snaps, considering
he only
some
played
other guys.
Around 200 snaps last season, which of 200 snaps, Joe, he had 33 pressures, and of those 200 snaps, dude, like I think they said 75 of them were passes. Like, that is ridiculous. So of 75 passing attempts, Joe, he had 33 pressures. That's pretty damn elite, dude.
It's bonkers, and I think that unlike Harold Perkins, who has already broken out, we can't talk about him because we already know who he is.
And I wanted to put him on there so bad, but
I knew
he's
you
already
did.
a breakout star. By the way, has a new number.
What did he switch to?
Number 4.
Is that what he wore in high school? What's the reasoning?
I think so, yeah.
Somebody's got to ask him, but I just think that Mikael Williams playing on a very loaded defense, for him to still be productive, and I think most importantly, he started to ascend more towards the end of the season. We started to see what he could do when he played in the national championship game. When he played against Ohio State, there's one play that he makes, I think it was against Paris Johnson or DeJuan Jones, where it's just a freaky play where you see the natural athleticism. You see that he's still the
one where he did the what I call the side dip over rip.
Yes.
The side dip over rip. That's, Joe, that move as a former O-lineman, it is the most elite. You know who else does it? Nolan Smith did it last year, and Harold Perkins. It is their go-to move. These dudes on the edge, is that what you're mentioning is their go-to moves.
You have to be freaky athletic and freaky flexible to pull off that move effectively. And I have rewatched the Ohio State Georgia game too many times because I've watched it for DeJuan Jones, for Paris Johnson. I just watched it for CJ Stroud for these evaluations. And that play keeps showing up. And I keep thinking, man, I got to pay attention to this Mikael Williams kid because he is so freaking good.
Right.
But I love that. I think that we're starting to see that Kirby knows that this kid is next, and he is the next guy. He's not an interior guy, but he is for 100%. I think he could maybe even be better than Nolan Smith, who I played well, but never really lived up to that level of production.
He just didn't have the production because his injury, his season got cut short with the pec pec injury. Right.
Yes.
All right. Who are you going to take with your number 1 overall pick?
This one's a layup. Cade Klubnik from Clemson.
Oh, okay. He was in my honorable mentions. Okay.
I was debating if this fit as a breakout star, but the way that I see Cade Klubnik, he didn't play in enough games for me to sit here and say this is a surefire kid. Because if we look at the guy before him, DJ Uiagalelei was great in the 2 games he played his freshman year, and now he stinks. Cade, though, one of the things that I paid attention to, Blake, when I was doing my research for the 3 guys that I have, is what offensive coordinators relocated that were top in the country. Or I looked for defensive coordinators. And Garrett Riley transitioning to Clemson is the biggest hire in the coordinator coaching carousel. Him stepping in, and for what he did with Max Duggan, who, I'm sorry to admit this, as much as I love Max Duggan, is not a very good quarterback. For as productive as he was, and we know that he has accuracy limitations, decision-making limitations, was a tough kid. I think that in this new offense, this new look Clemson offense with a strong offensive line returning, the kid Klubnik is going to be in the Heisman conversation. That is not a hyperbole, and it should not be. Clemson is back on the map, and this, for me, put them back on the map by hiring Riley, and Klubnik was the top recruit at quarterback in his class, and we are going to see that production next season early on.
I put him in my honorable mention because here's the reason why. I think for me, although I believe that Garrett Riley is a really good offensive coordinator, I want to see Dabo let the reins go first. Okay. And I just want to see, is he fully going to give Garrett Riley the ultimate say-so when it comes to everything offensively? Now, do I think that he is? Yes. Do I think that Dabo is a smart enough coach and a good enough coach to adapt and do these things? Yes and yes, because you don't go make a hire like Garrett Riley. You don't pay the money that you're paying him. You don't pay the buyout money for him to come to Clemson if you're not preparing yourself to take this step back. And I talked to a buddy of mine that's a beat writer and a radio host at Clemson when the move was made. And he said that he got on the record from Dabo that Dabo does not want to be in the day-to-day offensive play calling duties, that Dabo really does want to be this CEO. You know, the only name, image, and likeness that we have around here is our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Like, I think that that's what he wants to do. But you know what else that Dabo's done? Dabo has opened up his arms to the portal because Dabo knows, look, I probably am going to have to do this. I can't continue to do what I'm doing. I really like Cade Klubnik. He had some really rough scenarios that he had to go through last year. I remember, what was it, Joe, the first possession that he had against Notre Dame. I think that what they were on like the 4-yard line, and they were telling him to get them out of that situation. He's a freshman. Yeah. I think he got put in some really bad spots. I honestly thought that he had flashes against Tennessee. Here's another thing, too. The 2 touchdowns to 3 interceptions for him last season don't bother me.
No.
But I told you this yesterday when we talked about accuracy, right? Him going 61 of 100, I really like. I really like, because the games that he was in, the things that he was doing was against really good teams. Like, you got a really good idea of what you have in Cade Klubnik, and he's a really good runner. So I had him as my honorable mention. Mm-hmm. I think that he could do some good things. With my number 2 overall pick, and I'm going to be labeled a homer with this one. Okay, no, it's not Harold Perkins.
What else you guys at?
But let me ask you this. Where do you have Eli Ricks ranked in your defensive backs for the NFL draft? Do you think he's a first rounder?
No.
Okay.
No. I don't have as one of the top DBs now.
Okay. But most people do, don't they? If I'm not mistaken. Like, I'm not just
at the beginning of the season, Eli Ricks was, and it's the circumstance of oftentimes these early rankings are based on season awards and whatnot. I think a lot of people came to the realization that Eli Ricks is physically a bit limited. He's stiff. He's not very flexible. He's a zone-specific corner.
I could have told you that.
Yeah, he's a zone-specific corner. Are you going to say Desmond Ricks?
No, I'm actually going – no, I wouldn't be a homer with that one. I'm actually going to go LSU wide receiver Malik Neighbors. What's interesting about him, okay, and I've been on him – like, beginning of LSU's camp last year, I was all over him because I said this, Joe, literally as LSU starts camp tomorrow, and we will be there, I said this connection between Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors is unreal. Here's a stat for you. He was the number 1 in the SEC in catches at 72. He was number 2 in the SEC with and receiving yards with 1,107. Now, his touchdowns are going to have to get better for him to be a breakout star, but I think that they will. Joe, he had 128 receiving yards against Georgia and really exposed Kelee Ringo. Kelee Ringo went out there and ran a 4.3 something, 4.4 flat, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. And had a lot of look, he's got speed. Malik Neighbors turned on the jets and left him in the dust, and I think he can be what I think Malik Neighbors can be everything everybody thought Kayshon Boutte would be this season, right? I think that there are teams that have these specific position groups that, like, you're always just going to get really good dudes from this school at this position. Look at what Alabama's doing along the defensive line. Hell, Washington's got like 72 of them. The Commanders has like 72 of them. They do some really good things along the defensive line. For LSU, it's wide receivers. Dude, I know that he had an off the field issue during Mardi Gras. That case got dropped because it was kind of bogus. But nevertheless, Joe, he had the most quiet 72 catches to lead the SEC. He had the most quiet 1,000-yard season, and he had the most quiet SEC championship game that I think that I can remember, because nobody is talking about a team that everybody believes that if LSU can win the SEC West, okay, and compete with Alabama, well, Joe, he was their offensive juggernaut. So for this reason alone, I think a face of a program or an offense besides a quarterback who may make that next step to be a household name is Malik Neighbors. Now, last thing I'll say with him is he was returning punts and fumbled 2 of them against Florida State, and you had LeBron James tweeting at him. It was literally the worst moment a player can literally have.
Yeah.
And so the only thing he did in response was go out there and have another 70 catches, another 1,000 yards, and he just really dominated some really good defensive backs.
I like this pick. I'm not going to give you full credit because it is a homer pick. Homer picks aren't allowed.
I'm okay with that.
But
I'm okay with that.
I do agree with you that Malik Neighbors doesn't get brought up enough when we talk about LSU wide receivers. We wasted so much of our breath on Kayshon Boutte, who never lived up to the expectations that we hoped for. And I'm honestly past him after the way that he performed at the NFL Combine. He was extremely underwhelming. But I think that Neighbors, with all the distractions at the wide receiver position, didn't get the recognition that he deserved for being as good of a player he is. I'll throw this out there. I have said that Jaden Daniels is the quarterback that Brian Kelly has never had at Notre Dame. I think that Neighbors is one of the receivers that Brian Kelly never had when he was at Notre Dame that he wishes he could have had. I think he's a great player. I like this pick. I will push back slightly because he was productive, but to your point, did not get the recognition and should get recognition as one of the top receivers in college football.
No, and you know what's crazy, Joe? He didn't even make an all-SEC team, right?
Which is nuts.
Which is, you lead the conference in catches and you lead in your second in receiving yards. And Joe, he didn't even make an all-SEC team, right? Like, I mean, I'm sitting here trying to ask the questions of like, what's going on there? All right, who's your number 2 overall pick? Hold on. You know what? I should have done this from the beginning. You ready? Who's your number 2 overall pick?
My number 2 overall pick is Tanner Mordecai, quarterback, University of Wisconsin.
Ooh.
No, Tanner Mordecai.
Ooh.
This is a good pick. Tanner Mordecai. Is that an ew or an O? Is that a displeasure?
Okay, explain it. Sell me on it. Sell me on Tanner Mordecai.
Tanner Mordecai at SMU, man, we're talking about quiet players last year. Dude, he had a really, really, by the way, if you hate this pick, you're going to hate the next one. He had such a productive year last year at SMU, but like SMU was okay, so they didn't really get the recognition that they deserved. But Tanner Mordecai has 33 passing touchdowns. He goes for over 3,000 passing yards, 65% completion percentage, and only 10 interceptions. My biggest takeaway, though, here, he's transferring to Wisconsin, a team that added some talented receivers.
And a great offensive coordinator.
But that's my big thing here, is that as divided as I believe the college football world is on Phil Longo, is that Drake May's doing? Is it Phil Longo's doing? Phil Longo has produced a lot of very productive quarterbacks in the history of college football that he has had the chance to work with. Drake May happens to be one of the very talented players that he's had the chance to work with recently. Mordecai, I think, stepping into a situation where Longo had one of the most productive offenses in the country, a top passing offense in the country that averaged 309 passing yards per game. That to me is very promising. I think that Tanner Mordecai stepping into a division, a conference that lacks DB talent, that lacks passing defenses to slow down an offense like this, I really wouldn't be shocked if Mordecai doesn't go for over 45 touchdowns, 40 touchdowns, and over 4,000 passing yards. I think he's set up to succeed, and I'd be shocked if he fails.
Well, you're going to really find out with him because if I'm not mistaken, either week 1 or week 2, they play at Washington State. They got to go to Pullman, right?
Yeah.
But to your point, and I'm trying to pull this up. Okay, so they have Buffalo to start the season off, then Washington State and Pullman, Georgia Southern, Purdue, Rutgers, Iowa, Illinois,
Not
Ohio
a tough
State,
schedule.
Indiana, Northwestern, Nebraska, Minnesota. That's not a tough schedule. The toughest game that you got on that schedule right now is Ohio State. And from a defensive perspective, even though they've lost some dudes, look, man, Iowa's replenishing their defense. So we'll see. I don't hate that pick. I don't hate that pick. Let me tell you the only thing I hate about that pick is I don't like when people overreact to a group of 5 quarterback going to a power 5, okay, and saying this guy's going to be good. I don't like that at all. Right now, are there exceptions to that ruling? Yes. Like there are always exceptions to the rules, right? Mm-hmm. But historically, when guys do that, it does not bode well, okay? So the only pushback that I'm going to give you is, yeah, he did that at SMU. But, I mean, the Big Ten doesn't have scrubs, okay? Like, they don't have scrubs. So we'll have to wait and see. And who's he going to throw it to, okay? Now, I know that we talked about it, Wisconsin a little bit, but you still, like, Joe, they're going through a completely different offensive overhaul. Now, I like Luke Fickell. I've always liked him. I just don't know if I'm going to go there yet. All right. My number 3 overall pick is actually a duo. Okay.
Oh, I've also got a duo for my number 3 overall.
Do you really?
Yeah. It's not going to be yours. It's not yours. I guarantee it's not yours.
Okay.
You're going to hate it.
Yeah, I probably will. Jet Johnson and Nathaniel Watson at Mississippi State, linebackers. Joe, the most interesting thing and the biggest, and I'm talking about the biggest oversight from the SEC a season ago was the 2 linebackers at Mississippi State.
Okay.
Jet Johnson led the conference with 115 tackles and 3 sacks. And Nathaniel Watson had 113 tackles and was number 2 in the SEC with 6 sacks. I'm going to tell you a little something here. Now, they lose Tyrus Wheat. I get that. They lose Emmanuel Forbes. I get that. But what they got returning in that front 7 with these 2 dudes, bro, between the both of them, they got 230 tackles. They are tackling machines. The simple fact that people think that Zach Arnett is just a horrible coach, I don't know where they get it from. Now, they got a lot that they're going to have to overcome. Mississippi State lost their head coach. Mike Leach is something that's extremely unfortunate, okay? Extremely unfortunate. But, dude, Jet Johnson and Nathaniel Watson can absolutely play. I'm going to make you this bet right now.
Okay.
When we talk about this in a year from now, you're going to tell me, Blake, Nathaniel Watson can play. Because what he's going to do in the combine is he's going to go out there. He's going to probably run a 4.55, 4.6 at 230, 235 pounds. You're going to go look at his stats at Mississippi State, and you're going to be like, damn, bro, he's got 3 seasons with 100 tackles. He's got multiple seasons with 6 and 7 sacks. It is the best. I'm going to make this right. I'm going to make this right now. I have a linebacker, not maybe traditional, but from a linebacker core. There's not a linebacker core better in the country than what you'll see in Starkville on a Saturday night. And I will tell you this is the kind of stuff that I think separates the SEC, right? Because when you think of Mississippi State under Mike Leach, what did you think about? You thought about Air Raid. You thought about Will Rogers, who also is returning. You thought about so many different things that about Mississippi State. It all had to do offensively. Joe, defensively, they weren't scrubs. No. You know, it wasn't like TLC. We don't want no scrubs. Scrubs, no one but me. Okay? Dude, I am telling you that when you have 2 linebackers that have that many tackles, Okay.
That one's definitely in the weeds. Because I do agree with you that Mississippi State had a very underrated defense. But let me ask you this: like, what's their ceiling that you're projecting here? Like, what are you?
Here's my hot take of the day. Okay, I think that Zach Arnett and Mississippi State's going to surprise some people. I think they're going to win 8 games.
I think that's plausible. I think it's possible.
If you ask anybody, it's not plausible. Okay, because they lost their head coach, they've lost some guys. I'm just look. I will also make this bold prediction, brother. I watch LSU film and I watch Georgia film, and I really been watching a lot of Alabama film lately because I wanted to see their offensive line. They got some dudes up front. And I think that this is simple nature that Mississippi State's going to slow things down a little bit. I think what you're going to do is you're going to start seeing, hey, man, they got some athletes. So I don't know what I'm necessarily expecting, but how in the world are you going to tell me that these two guys, between the both of them, have 230 tackles that they're not – you didn't even know who they were? Right, like
no, I've heard of. I know who I'm aware of them, but like they're not on my radar as draft prospects. And I'm going to be completely honest, they probably won't be.
I didn't mean it like that. It was a horrible way to put it.
Yeah.
What I meant was just like you didn't even think about going to them. No. But I'm watching Alabama film. I'm watching LSU film. I'm watching all this film, and all I keep hearing all the live long day. You ready for it? Chet Johnson, Nathaniel Watson. I was like, if Brad Nessler says Nathaniel Watson one more time, I'm gonna throw up. Okay, but I can't because he's all over the place, Joe. He's everywhere. They're the best sideline to sideline linebacker duo in the country. It's not in Georgia. It's not at LSU. It's not at Alabama. It's not Ohio State. It's not at Penn State. It's not at Clemson or Texas A&M. It's in Mississippi State. It's in Starkville.
I don't mind the pick. I don't know if I would have gone that deep, but here's one that's gonna.
All right,
it's terrible. This is terrible. You're gonna hate this. So here's my duo.
So here's your third overall pick. Hold on.
Yep. Kind of funny how it worked out this way that our last picks both ended up being duos. Okay, so I really dug deep here. Like I dug way too deep. I went on my tinfoil hat theory run of trying to find the most unique pick here.
There's nothing that I expected something out of
one of the most productive offenses in the country over the past couple years.
You go offensive line duos.
Nope.
Swear to God. Okay.
Nope. That would have been a really good one if I did the Oregon offensive tackles. You just gave me an idea that I should have done. Johnny Cornelius, the Rhode Island tackle.
They were also my honorable mentions.
Oh man, that would have been a good one.
Yep.
One of the most productive offenses in the country over the past couple of years was at Western Kentucky. The year before that offensive coordinator was at a school called Houston Baptist, which is an FCS program.
Yes.
The offensive coordinator, his name is Zach Kitley. He coached Bailey Zappi, who went on to the NFL. He coached Austin Reed, who almost topped in the portal and went somewhere, but decided to stick it out with the Hilltoppers. They were number 15 in the country in total offense, one of the best passing attacks in the country. Do you know where he is this season?
Where?
He's at Texas Tech. For my duo, and this pains me to pick this guy. It pains me because I think he kind of stinks. But I believe that Tyler Show and their leading receiver from last year, Duran Bradley, who had 700 yards, and I think he's a redshirt freshman, led the team in receiving. I think you insert Kitley, who has, again, taking total – it's not like he's taken quality players and turned them into elite players. He's taken absolute nobodies and put them onto a national radar of people that we're talking about. We were talking about Austin Reed as one of the best transfer portal quarterbacks because of what he did at Western Kentucky. So I think Tyler Show and Duran Bradley are going to have a stupidly productive season. And we're all going to be sitting here like, where the hell did this come from, Tyler Show? You stunk the whole time you were at Texas Tech.
You know what's interesting now that I'm thinking about this, and what's interesting, I'm actually going to take a step back and not argue with you. Here's why.
Good.
Because, well, here's my thought process.
Okay.
Are we sold on Texas and Oklahoma?
No. Or
So-
Texas,
so-
TCU either, or the top teams in the Big 12, or Kansas State.
Well, my only thought process would be is if TCU can do it, can Texas Tech?
Yeah, I think it's plausible, and I think that this hiring is so underrated. It wasn't even reported on. You look at any article, and I looked up a bunch of them that list the top transition hires for offensive coordinators. Kitley's not even brought up once.
The only thing, though, brother, the only thing is Texas Tech has some really below average talent.